to add some of the dents and scratches. And the last one, and I'm not sure why the colors aren't coming out right, but the common components, well, it's just that's just a little trick that, you know, if you were in PS2 development or anything like that, you'd probably be familiar with. Just parts where you can reuse over and over on the model that you can afford to give a fair amount of real estate on the unwrap, and it gives you the impression of a higher res model. So things like the pipes in this case are going to be reused, or some of the emissive elements are going to be reused. So now we're getting to modeling, and the first thing you want to do, or we like to do, is to make a rough proportion model. And, you know, it's nothing fancy, you just want to get the overall feel right of the proportion. And this mesh right here is about 30 to 40,000 polygons, roughly. And it's really a good way to think about it, sort of a bridge between the high poly and the low poly. Because since it's broken out between organics and hard surfaces already, you can take, you know, the organics straight into Mudbox or ZBrush. And since it's you know, only 30 to 40,000 polygons, it's a good start for optimization to make it into a low poly model. So you want to hold on to this after you've arrived at something that you like. You know, like a good fundamental thing to keep in mind when you're making any character is like silhouette. And the test is basically, can you tell this character apart from the next character if you have, like, if it's only in shadow, if it's like it's just matte black. And it's especially important for Unreal Tournament 3 because the gameplay, you know, all the characters move around really quickly. So it's helpful to be able to identify fairly quickly who he is. And if you can tell who he is in complete darkness, then it stands to reason that it'll be all right once we have color and details on him. And that's just a quick turnaround to kind of illustrate that too. So with that, on to high poly modeling. And at Epic, it normally takes us, you know, 15 days or more to make a hero character from scratch if we're doing the high poly modeling. So we've come up with some things that kind of speed up production a little bit. And one would be, you know, for example, using James's technique of Paintovers, and also, you know, just making base models to start. And it's pretty useful, as I'll show you here. Let's say you have like a Space Marine character, right, which is really rare for Epic, right? He's got, like, you know, he's got a spacesuit on and all that, and you really only have to model, if you're the modeler, you only have to model the head as an organic and kind of model the rest of the suit as a hard surface. You know, that could work, but the one thing that you would miss out on is, that you might miss out on, is proportion. Because it's much easier to arrive at something that's really super detailed, but might be 6 heads tall instead of 7.5 heads tall in terms of proportion, something really detailed, really stout, if you're only guessing as you go. So in this case, what I did was I made a model of a female nude model here, and I use that as a base for when I'm making any female characters. And, you know, make it fairly generic so that I can adjust it as I want, you know, change the build, change the face. And when I'm getting ready to get started on a female character, I just add the rough proportion elements on top of it. And the good thing about this is that you'll never have a problem with proportion later on, which is really difficult to fix. But also, you can see if a piece of armor will work or not immediately on the character. So that's just a nice thing to save you some time in the long run. At this point here, we can go back to Loc and just grab the rough proportion model, the organics, and export it as an OBJ for Mudbox. Now, a trick to Mudbox or ZBrush, you know, either of those packages, excuse me, is when you choose to place detail in the model. And what I found works best is in the lower iterations, the lower poly count of the mesh. You put, like, really the macro details in there, the large, you know, the surface details like the muscles and so on and so forth. And as you go up in subdivision, the details you add become more minute, you know, real subtle. And if you do it that way, instead of subdividing it 4 times as soon as you open the model or open your OBJ up and start sculpting, you'll avoid the lumpy kind of look that can happen sometimes in some models. But since we're finished with this, we're ready to process this part and optimize it. But a problem we ran into is that, let's say like this guy's torso is 5 million polygons or 8 million. How do we get it back into max? Because when we try to export it as an OBJ, it exceeds the file size limit. Well, what we do is we tend to break these up into chunks before we break it to max. And in Mudbox, it's fairly simple. You just choose the Select Faces tool, brush, and just select faces, export selection, and then hide it. You just repeat the steps. And generally speaking, on a reasonable machine, you can get chunks of about 500,000 polygons to be able to work with it and optimize it. If it's a high-end kind of machine, it can be about 900,000 polygons per chunk that you export. And this tool here, Polygon Correction Remove Tools, is what we use pretty much exclusively for optimization. And for us, we can get optimization about 70% without a visible loss in detail for what we do. And also the good thing is that it can protect borders so that even though we've broken the model up into chunks, we just have select borders checked off in the options, and it'll make sure the model appears seamless even though it's been optimized and broken up. One thing that's cool about it is that we can do batch optimization. And here we're just choosing the directory we want it to crunch, and I place all my OBJs in a specific file for it to do the batch optimization. And we can define levels of optimization in the top row here. And the cool thing there is that, let's say at the face, for example, we want it to be detailed, obviously, but we also want it to process a normal map. So you have to take some care with how much you optimize it. This way, we can have these predefined levels, or we can define the levels as we want, and it'll give us 5 versions of the same chunk. So if we want, we can choose the one that's optimized at 35%. If we can generate a normal map from that, then fine. But if we can't, we can go farther until we reach that point where optimization meets quality. And here's just obviously showing it where we want to place it, place the optimized chunks, and you can add prefixes or suffixes automatically with Polygon Cruncher. This is the progress here. And after it's all finished, we can import one by one the chunks. And as you can see, these are, each OBJ has its own different colors, so you can see the borders of the chunks. But this is a render in mental ray with 70% optimization, and they're with the same segments, so you don't really see any of the borders. And so that's great for generating normal maps. So next we'll go over to Paintovers in Photoshop before we go to hard surface modeling. In my opinion, it takes a fraction of a second to draw a line, and it takes, it can take seconds or a minute or minutes to carve that line in geometry. So you can't really beat the speed in doing corrective paintovers or testing out ideas. And at Epic, we try to work. One of the things we try to do is, detail, and oftentimes the concept will kind of hint at how the object works, but we need to explain it once we get to the actual mesh. We need to go a little farther in explaining how this thing works. So what I like to do is take a screen grab, which you see here, and just make a paintover and quickly figure out, all right, maybe this will work this way, maybe it'll be cool that way. You can quickly, get an idea improved, or get it mixed, or what have you, or just see if you're going in the wrong direction this way. In the past, we would model, our ideas out, but it's costly. It can take us a week or weeks if the idea doesn't work. So it's just something to think about. Approach in detail with hard surface modeling. There are 2 ways that we generally like to model, and they have pros and cons. And if we this talk, I like to call them Molly by intersection.